cats and kittens. Sure do miss you.
Cheryl's right. We sure have missed being together. And now that we're talking about coming back together for a worship service starting on June 7th, there's a lot that we need to talk about and what to expect.
Hello? Hello?
So this is Westminster's reopening plan, and our hope is that the guidelines I'm about to talk to you about will be helpful for us in taking baby steps to meeting back together and doing it as safely as we can. So Westminster's last in-person worship service was March 15th. That's been a little over 2 months ago. So how are we deciding that now is a good time to come back together? The leadership of Westminster has used the following indicators to help us make a decision as to whether we're ready to reopen. And that includes the readiness of staff and leadership, statements from the CDC and South Carolina DHEC, the government officials, our best assessment of COVID-19 and the spread in South Carolina and in Sumter, collaboration with other churches, and as you know, some of the churches are already opening up here in Sumter. And then, of course, we're hearing concerns and viewpoints from the congregation as a whole. So as we've considered these indicators, the leadership of Westminster believes that now is a good time to start the process of reopening, making sure that we have guidelines in place and some precautions in place in order to make sure that we are looking after the health and safety of everyone who might come to our service. One thing we need to note is that all of these guidelines and plans are tentative. None of this is set in stone. As new information comes in, we will make changes to these guidelines as needed. So keep that in mind.
We're doing metafilming better than anybody's ever done before.
This has never been attempted before.
So what are the worship service guidelines the leadership is proposing? What will our worship services look like, at least at first, when we come back together? So the first thing we're going to say is we encourage those who are sick and those who are within the at-risk community to stay at home. If you're sick, just stay home. Don't put any other persons at risk. If you are in the at-risk community, we're encouraging you to stay at home. Now, who are those in the at-risk community? Well, it's people 65 and older, or people who are immunocompromised or who have chronic health conditions. Now, if you happen to be in the at-risk category, but you want to come to the worship service anyway, know that we're not going to turn you away. But we do want to encourage everyone to take a look at the risk factors and take those into consideration. And we are giving you permission, in fact, even encouraging people that if you're in this at-risk category, please stay at home. And if you do stay at home, whether you're in the at-risk category or not, we will continue to provide an online worship service for you. This is social distancing. This is extreme social distancing. Now, for those who are coming to the worship service, let's recognize that we're going to have to practice some physical distancing. The CDC recommends that we stay 6 feet apart from one another, and no hugging and no handshaking. And now the magic number for our worship service is going to be 60. And that is, we're going to try to keep the number of people in the sanctuary at one time down to 60 people. And I know that sounds like a small amount, but we're doing that based on some calculations that the leadership has agreed upon. If we keep the number in the sanctuary to 60, we know that we can safely physically distance from one another. Now, each week we will reevaluate and decide whether we're going to increase that number or lower it or keep it the same. In order to keep the numbers in the sanctuary 60 or below, we're going to ask everyone to RSVP. Simply, we're going to send out an invitation and we're going to ask you each and every week to tell us how many people from your household will be attending or plan to attend on Sunday. That way we can try to make sure that we manage this as well as we can.
You're too close! You're too close! Social distance!
Now, as difficult as it may be, there are going to be a few things that we're going to forego for the time being, probably for the first few Sundays back. Things like Sunday school. We will have an online Zoom Sunday school class every Sunday, but for the time being, nothing in person. We're also going to forego having nursery and junior church until we can figure out how to do those ministries safely and well. We've had a lot of discussion about congregational singing, particularly because there have been some studies that have shown that singing in groups raises the risk of infection. Because of this, we may want to try some alternatives to congregational singing, or at least try to find some ways to make our congregational singing safer. We also will not have bulletins, coffee, snacks, or be celebrating the Lord's Supper in the short term. Poor Nathan. He's so sad. Yeah, I know those guidelines don't sound all that great. In fact, they sound a little bit like a bummer. But at the same time, let's recognize that these are temporary baby steps to get us back into the swing of things when it comes to our worship services. Rather than rushing back in and something terrible happening, we would really rather pace ourselves. This is a marathon, not a sprint, to get back to a normal worship service. So let's be patient with the process and understand that we're doing all these things not to be fuddy-duddy killjoy sourpusses, but to love one another well. And in order to love one another well, we're going to take some precautions in order to care for one another and look out after one another's welfare, health, and safety.
Yeah.
He's not saying we have too much time on our hands. We have the appropriate amount of time on our hands.
Now, the leadership of Westminster strongly encourages the use of masks inside the building. I realize that may not be a popular guideline for some, but what we're really trying to do is to prevent the spread of this virus any further. Because there are some people who seem to be asymptomatic and can still spread it to others, it is out of a concern of safety for others that we're wearing masks. Now, if you do not have a mask, one will be made available for you as you enter the building. This is a way for us to love our neighbors as ourselves. It's a way of being able to care for each other by saying, I'm wearing this mask, not because it's comfortable, not because I like it, but because I love you. I love the other people around me, and I don't want to unwittingly give them this virus. If you think about it, it's really a minor inconvenience to wear a mask, but it can send a powerful message to the people around you. If we're wearing a mask, other people know this person cares about me. This person is looking out for me. And isn't that what we want the church to be about? A loving community where we're looking out for one another. And let's remember, the mask is temporary. The call to love our neighbor is permanent.
This is where the magic happens for every Sunday. You got your ring light. You got your crab on the floor marking where you're supposed to stand. You got Paul over there. Social distancing with a camera.
Now, as for offering, we're not going to be taking up an offering like we have in the past, but offering plates will be located at the back of the sanctuary. And again, we're doing this to keep the spread of the virus from occurring as much as we can. If you prefer to give electronically, you can go to our website and give there.
How's my hair?
Very beatily.
So I hope all of that information is helpful to you. I'm sure there are plenty of things that I've left out, and I'm certain that there are things that you wish that we could do differently. And believe me when I say, so do I. But let's remember the passage in Ephesians chapter 4 where Paul writes, I therefore, a prisoner for the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. And that's what I hope that we're able to do with all of the craziness that's been going on during this pandemic and all of the strangeness of trying to do church differently, both at home and even when we come back for the first little bit at least. Let's try to make sure that we're bearing with one another, that we're patient, that we're humble, that we're gentle, and all of those things to give glory and honor to God, to show Christ to one another, and to show that we really are bound to one another in the Holy Spirit. So I look forward to seeing those of you who will be here on June 7th. And for those of you who I will not see on that day, I look forward to the day where we'll all be back together.
Say something like, it's just not the same without you.
It's just not the same without you. Sounds kind of fair. It's just not the same without you. It's just not the same